Here is another example of solving a rational equation. I put a note on here to make sure that you always make a note of where the expressions are undefined, because if you end up getting an answer in the end that would create a denominator of 0 in your original equation, then you can't include that number because you are never allowed to divide by 0. So that's where I'm going to start before I even try to solve this. X is not allowed to be 7 because if you plugged in x equals 7, you're going to end up with 0 in the denominator. So just make a note of that, whether it's a mental note or you physically write it down, because you want to keep that in mind when you get to the end of the problem. So what I'm going to do is multiply every single thing in this equation by a common denominator. Now you may be looking at this like, I have no idea how to find this common denominator, but it's a lot more simple than you may think. All you've got to do is multiply each different denominator together. So because my two denominators are 2 and x minus 7, I'm just going to make my common denominator 2 times x minus 7. And you don't need to distribute the 2. That'll give you more work than you need. So once you have your common denominator, you go ahead and multiply all 3 terms by the common denominator. So I haven't actually done anything yet. I just rewrote the problem with the common denominator multiplied by every term. If you aren't comfortable with multiplying fractions, go ahead and put your common denominator over 1. That could help you so you can see that that common denominator is actually part of your numerators. And now if you look at each term, so this is all one term. So everything that I just blocked off is its own term. Those are being multiplied together. In the first one, the x minus 7 is going to cancel. In the second one, the 2 is going to cancel. And in the third one, the x minus 7 is going to cancel. So this allows us to not even have to deal with fractions anymore because all of my denominators are gone. So the first term, we're left with a 2 and a 2x minus 9. Second, we're left with x and x minus 7. And then finally, we're left with just 2 times 5. So now this just becomes an algebraic equation that we have to solve. We've got to get x by itself. So in order to do this, I want to get rid of the parentheses first. You don't want to deal with any parentheses when you're trying to get x by itself. So go ahead and distribute. If you want to pause the video and try to solve this yourself first, I highly encourage that. So first thing I did was distribute. And now that I don't have any parentheses left, I'm going to combine like terms on the left-hand side of that equal sign. So the 4x and the minus 7x are able to be combined. Now, whenever you have a quadratic, hopefully some of you have an idea of how to solve this. You have different options and different methods that you can use. But the first thing that you should do when you have a quadratic is to make sure that it equals 0. So right now, having the 10 on that side, I'm going to go ahead and move it over. And that gives me x squared minus 3x minus 28. So if you were unsure of how to solve it the first time I mentioned it, hopefully now that you see it equal to 0, you have a better idea. I think the best and quickest method here would be to factor. So you're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 28 and add to negative 3. Those two numbers would be negative 7 and positive 4. Then you take your factors, set them equal to 0, and we end up with x equals 7 and x equals -4. Now, I know it's been a while since the beginning of this problem, but I told you guys to make either a mental note or a physical note of where this expression or where these expressions would be undefined. And if you recall, we said that x is not allowed to be 7. So we cannot include x equals 7 in our answer. We'll see if the screen lets me write this long word. I can already tell it's going to be slow, so bear with me. Oh my gosh, come on. Okay, we would consider 7 an extraneous solution. So if I asked you just for the solution of this equation, you would say that it is x equals -4, and that is all. If I specifically asked you, are there any extraneous solutions? If so, what are they? That is the only time you would include 7. But if you are only asked for the solution to this equation, the answer is -4, and that is all, because 7 is not going to work.